Alright, and welcome to the quadratic formula, level 1. Now we're going to start off with problem 1a, and it says use the quadratic formula to find the zeros of f of x equals x squared plus 5x plus 6. Okay, so the first thing we want to know is, well, what is the quadratic formula? And it's this. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And so when students see this for the first time, it really does seem like a lot. However, what I'm going to do is try and make this very manageable for you. So what's our very first step? Well, we always want to go to our function and want to label our coefficients. So a is always the number in front of x squared. We don't see a number in front of x squared, so we assume that a is 1. We know that our b term is 5, it's in front of x, and our c term is the 6. So I'm going to fill in these a, b, and c's into these various positions. So what I want to do is always take my quadratic formula and I want to rewrite it with nothing but parentheses where I see letters. So instead of negative b, I write negative parentheses. Plus or minus the square root of, instead of b squared, I write parentheses squared. Minus, now 4 is a number, so I still keep the number, parentheses for a, parentheses for c. And then I write this all over to a. Okay, now let's take the things that we labeled and plug them in. The first letter I see is b, and I know that my b term is 5, so I plug in 5. Let's see here, I see another b term, and I plug in 5. And then I see my a term is next, my a term is 1, and my c term is 6. And lastly, down here on the bottom, we have another a, so that a term is going to be 1 again. Now, what I like to do is I like to give my students just a very easy method in order to simplify this. So let's go ahead and put kind of our next version up over here. And I always say it like this. I always say we want to simplify the outside, and the outside means the outside of the square root. And we know that a negative times a positive is in fact a negative 5. And so let's just go ahead and write outside. Okay? And then from there, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and simplify the inside. And the inside represents the inside of the square root. So the first thing I see is 5 squared. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and write it like this. So negative 5 plus or minus the square root. Okay, and then going back to this color, we see that we have 5 squared. 5 times 5 is 25. And here, as I look at these four numbers, we're really saying negative 4 times 1 times 6. I like to count out my negatives in the beginning. So for instance, I only see one negative, and one negative stays negative. And then 4 times 1 is 4, and 4 times 6 is 24. Oh, that's going to be nice and easy. Okay, and then lastly, oh, and by the way, that was the inside. And now we want to tackle the bottom. And I think we all know this. 2 times 1. Well, what in the world is 2 times 1? 2 times 1 is going to give us 2. Okay. Now, let me go ahead and, you know what, let's just continue this for right now. Okay. And then what we want to do now is we want to simplify the inside again. So let's write this inside again. And so we have 25 minus 24. Well, we know that 25 minus 24 is, of course, 1. So negative 5 plus or minus the square root all over 2. And we can see that 25 minus 24 is 1. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to simplify our square root. If you need to use your calculator, you can. You can push control x squared. And if you push these two buttons, it will give you the square root symbol. But if you take the square root of 1, what you're going to get is 1. And so this, of course, gives us this. X equals negative 5 plus or minus, switching colors here, because remember the square root of 1 is just 1. There's no more square root sign. It's gone. All over 2. Now, this is a tempting place for students to either get stop or get stuck, but we can actually take this a little bit further. So let me really clear this up so you don't get confused, and I want you to pause the video, finish taking notes up to this point. Okay, so what is this really saying? Well, this is actually saying that there are two solutions. We call this symbol plus or minus, okay? And what it's telling me is that I can write this as two different solutions. I can say there's negative 5. We look at the top symbol, the plus, negative 5 plus 1 all over 2, comma, and then there's also a negative 5, and we have the bottom symbol, minus 1 all over 2. And now we just go ahead and simplify these down. So on the top, negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4 over 2. And negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6 over 2. And it seems like my zeros, or my solutions, are going to be negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, comma, and negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Okay, so those are the zeros. Let's label that. The zeros, or the solutions that we were looking for. Now let me go ahead and write this over here. So we have x equals negative 2, comma, negative 3. We could even graph this. We could say if we go to the left, 1, 2, 3. We have a point there. We have a point there. We notice that our a term is a positive 1. This will be a very skinny graph just opening up. Okay? And the solutions that we found were at negative 3 and negative 2. Okay, here's the next thing we want to do. Let's take a look at problem 1b. Okay, I went ahead and I took 1b and I actually stacked it right below 1a because I want you to notice that these functions are actually completely the same. So you've actually done 1b in a previous assignment. It says factor the function to find the zeros of f of x equals x squared plus 5x plus 6. So let's just go ahead and try that. We know that when we want to factor a specific function, we set f of x equal to 0, and then we have our x squared plus 5x plus 6. And when we factor that, we want to split it up into two sets of parentheses. So I say, okay, well, I know that x splits up into x and x. And over here, I always look at my c term, the 6, and I say, you know what? What two things multiply to be 6 and add up to be 5? So I know that 2 times 3 is 6, and 2 plus 3 is 5. Those are the numbers that we're looking for, x plus 2 and x plus 3. Now from here, in order to solve for x, you take both of these and you set them equal to 0. So x plus 2 equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0, and from here we know how to get the x by itself. Minus 2, and x is equal to negative 2, comma, minus 3, and x is equal to negative 3. And wait a second, do those solutions match what we found earlier? Yes, they do. So you're probably thinking, okay, Mr. Hastings, the factoring was way, way easier. Why do we learn the quadratic formula? And the reason is this. Not every quadratic function can be factored. So you can't always use this factoring method. However, no matter what function we're talking about, you can always use the quadratic formula. All right, let's move on to a second example, and then I'll turn you guys loose. Okay, so here I've put up 2a and 2b. 2a is telling us to use the quadratic formula, and 2b is telling us to factor. And so we're really going to start with the quadratic formula because that is, in fact, our focus. So remember, our very first step here is we always want to label our a term, b term, and c term. I see that my a, once again, is a positive 1, my b term is a 6, and my c term is an 8. And my next key to victory is I always take my quadratic formula and I always replace every single letter with a set of parentheses. Okay, so minus 4, a, c, very cool, and all over to a. A lot of students will not put the fraction bar over here, and that's a mistake. When we say all over, we're saying that it's everything on top is over that 2a. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug in everything. I know that my a value is, well, here, I'm sorry. We start with b, and our b value is 6. We have another b, which is 6. My a value is 1, and my c value is 8. And lastly, we have another a value, which is 1. Okay, let's go ahead and begin to tackle this. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to say, you know what? We want to tackle the outside. And we know that a negative times a positive is a negative 6. Alright, switching back, we have the plus or minus, we have our square root symbol. And here, we actually want to tackle the inside. So remember, we always do the outside, the inside, and the bottom. And I know that 6 squared is really 6 times 6, that's 36. And here, I only have one negative, and so let's see, a negative times, well, just itself is negative. And here we can do 4 times 1, which is 4, times 8, which is 32. Alright. And now switching back to this red to kind of complete this out. And our last thing that we want to say is, you know what, we have this 2 times 1, which of course is 2. And you'll notice that once you do the outside, inside, bottom, this gets incredibly simple pretty quickly. Now the next thing we want to highlight is we always want to then simplify the inside again. Let me write that out. Inside again, and this will give us something kind of close to x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of, and on the inside 36 minus 32, I have that blocked off in purple, is going to give us 4, and then of course that is all over 2. Alright, so let's go ahead and bring this up, and the next thing we want to do is we want to simplify that square root. So let's say x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus all over 2. And here, let's do purple again. Purple again. What is the square root of 4? Well, the square root of 4 is 2. If you don't believe me, you can push control x squared on your calculator, and it will pop up the square root symbol, and you can put the 4 on the inside. Now, recall from our previous example how many solutions are here. And there are, in fact, 2. So there's x is equal to negative 6 plus 2 over 2, comma, negative 6 minus 2 over 2. And from here, all we have to do is simplify. So I can say, well, you know what? Negative 6 plus 2, that's negative 4 over 2, comma, negative 6 minus 2, that's negative 8 over 2. And lastly, our x values are negative 4 divided by 2, which is negative 2, comma, negative 8 divided by 2, which is negative 4, and we can actually go ahead and graph our quadratic. As I clean this up, I would encourage you to pause the video and finish taking your notes. Okay, so I've gone ahead and drawn a little graph for us, and our solutions are negative 2 and negative 4 are our zeros, and I know that my a value is a positive 1. So I know that this graph opens up, and it seems like it's a little bit wider than the last one, maybe even a little bit deeper. Now let's go ahead and pop on over to 2b just to confirm this. Can we factor this? Well, let's take this f of x, let's set it equal to 0, and then from here, yeah, we know we're going to split it up into 2 factors. I know that x times x is x squared, and over here I can take this 8 term and split it up into 2 and 4, and I know 2 plus 4 is 6. So plus 2 plus 4, and then from here, if you will recall, all we have to do is we take these factors and set them equal to 0. So x plus 2 equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0, and we simply solve. And once again, you're probably saying, you know what, Mr. Hastings, this is way easier to find the solutions, because negative 2 and negative 4, there's negative 4, there's negative 2. It gives us the same answer as the quadratic formula. However, remember, not everything factors, but the quadratic formula will work always and forever. Alright, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see y'all in our level 2 video.